Happy Tuesday, everyone. Thank you for being here and joining me at the table. I'm excited to be here. It's another beautiful week here in Tampa. The weather is slightly starting to cool down, slightly less humidity. So I live vicariously through all of you who live in other beautiful climates where you actually have, changing leaves and beautiful weather and all of that good stuff. You'll see here to my left is Maisel. She's decided to sit next to me today to join us. And to my right, which I'll have to point this way because of the way the system works, but joining me today is Sam Eaton, and I'm super excited to have Sam on the show. So for those of you who might be joining us for the first time, welcome. And I just want to let you know we love your comments. We love your questions. So please feel free to type those in and let us know if you're there and you'd like to join in the conversation. We do our best to address all questions and comments as they come in to the system. And also we will have a conversation. We like it to be as fluid as possible. So today we're here to talk about kind of the evolution of HR and where it's been and where we see it today and where it's going. And Sam has such a great perspective as she is a business manager and coach for folks like me who are HR consultants and coaches. And she really helps me to create some structure and brainstorm and manage all the things. Because let me tell you, as a solopreneur, it can be overwhelming. And when you don't have that sounding board and that person to talk to and to identify when you're being crazy, it can get a little nutty. So thank you so much, Sam. I absolutely adore you and working with you. And I'm so glad you were able to join us today. So I would love for you to share a little bit with the audience about kind of what you do and what inspired you, right, with your history, because you're not necessarily a traditional HR practitioner, and yet you have moved into this space and created this amazing business, and you really do get it in ways that I think a lot of HR people might not get it. So I would love for the audience to hear your story, and then we'll kind of get into where we think HR is going in the future. And hello, everyone who's joining us. Thank you. We're excited to have you here.
Well, it's great to be here, Barbie. And thank you. It's how did I get here and your question on that? Well, first and foremost, I'm a business builder. This is my fifth business. But when I came into a previous business, I learned the world of HR. I was really hungry to understand more about it. How does it work? Why are people saying that? And just the human brain, how people interact. So I've done my own courses in neuroscience and all the rest of it. I have a huge sort of philosophy and mission behind me, which is I really want to help founders like you and those who've got bigger businesses to be able to facilitate what they want for their families. And I can do that by making them successful. I've got quite a colourful backstory, which I'm happy to share with others when there's more time, but it's a real mission for me. So where I've come from today, I saw during the whole thing with COVID, just this opportunity to help people. And I brought forward my plan for this business by at least 5 years. Everyone around me told me not to do it. Oh, you shouldn't be doing something like this through pandemic. And actually, it's probably the best decision I've made. Hey, I get to work with great people like you, huh?
Well, I'm incredibly grateful for sure. And I love how the perspective you bring, because you have founded several businesses and you have developed and built, millions of dollars worth of revenue for yourself and other organizations. I think it says a lot about who you are and your tenacity, but also the approach you take is definitely, I think, more forward thinking than perhaps other folks who look at HR as the, kind of the old school traditional model that we know is going to dissolve. It is going to become obsolete. It's already obsolete in many ways, right? We've got to move away from that. And I posted something just today, that HR will be obsolete in 10 years. And I do believe that. And I believe that in the way HR has been defined up until recently. And I see where organizations and HR practitioners and professionals are starting to change, and some are further along the progression than others. But I also believe firmly that it's not just HR that has to change, although it does have to happen from the inside out for sure. We also need the support and collaboration from the C-suite within our organizations. If we're going to make that transformation, we can't do it in a vacuum. And like I said, it has to happen from the inside out. But without the support of the CEOs and the CFOs and the COOs and the other leaders within the organization to accept the change that is happening, I don't know that we'll see the transformation that our people and our organizations deserve to see within our function. So that was what inspired me, to do what I do, and the conversations we've had is really helping folks to understand that HR is no longer the catch-all, right? Or it shouldn't be the catch-all of, we don't know where this goes, we don't know what to do with it. Oh, HR will do it. Or they're the party planner, or they're the person sitting there waiting to be told what to do, and the afterthought, the cleanup crew. There's so many things that we've heard and how people describe the function of work. And yet it's necessary. And some of those tactical pieces still have to get done. We still have to, as an example, enroll people in benefits. We still have to execute payroll. We still have to do all of these elements. But does it have to look the same as it has in the past? Does it have to be that stodgy, old school transaction? Or can we make those transactions meaningful moments of connection where we can actually help that person in different ways and build a relationship that perhaps didn't exist before? And so I think there's something there with that as well, is to really move from the traditional transaction to meaningful connection. And I think that's baked into identifying your purpose. And I shared this earlier today. I've shared this before, but I shared it today in a post. And if you guys didn't see it, this is a model I put together on HR fluency. And it starts with the old school, right? No purpose. We wait until we're told what to do. We're transactional. We're the order taker. But I do see organizations and people moving up this model into a purpose-driven and a purpose-centered function. So Sam, what are your thoughts on not only this model, but where you see the HR function going? Since you support not only me, you support lots of other practitioners. What are your thoughts on where this will go?
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Because I think when you look at, say, some of the visionary articles we see out there that says, hey, wait a minute, by 2030, the titles we have, and forgive me, I've got them here, chatbot and human facilitator, client change response manager, university for life coordinator. And hey, here's the one that actually I love, head of business behavior.
Oh, I like that.
So that's a great one. So we were talking earlier, right? This is where we're going. This is where we want to be. However, the question is the how. So what I'm seeing a lot of people struggle with at the moment is the fear that there's so much automation coming in with things like, the benefits packages, the, 401ks, how we do all of that kind of good stuff. People in some instances want to hold on to that and actually let go. It's the hardest thing for us to do as humans, right? Let go. And to your point, let's look at some of these softer skills, because we've been saying for years, that actually these soft skills are our hard skills of the future. So
Mm-hmm.
this whole piece around learning to deal with ambiguity and that becoming a skill in itself. And hey, we saw that in the book that Steve Cadigan has written in Workquake, where he talks about that, the importance of that.
Yes, for
And
sure.
the fundamentals that we've all been taught around HR, we all know I wasn't taught as an HR. I didn't do the degrees. I have gone out and done my own self-learning with people like INSEAD and other courses. But I'm comfortable with that change. I'm comfortable with using these systems to be able to focus on people.
Right.
And that's where it goes through to your model about purpose identified. I think once you get into that stage, we are in an exciting era, right? It's exciting and scary all in one because we can form businesses. Any one of us could be reporting into a 19, 20-year-old who might know more than us about some things. You just wouldn't see that 10 years ago. And
True.
I don't think that's a bad thing.
Right. Well, I also think we have to look at our employees as multidimensional. And
Mm.
one of the things we know is that every one of us, whether we're an employee or an entrepreneur or a coach or a consultant or whatever, however we define our professional selves, we are sophisticated consumers. And people want a consumer like experience at work. And
Yeah.
how do we deliver that? Well, we deliver that through the same types of tools, processes, and systems that we use in the consumer world. So, to your point, instead of being afraid to embrace the technology that's out there, what if we shifted that and said, let's look at what's the best technology to offload some of this tactical work so that I can focus on the meaningful, the deeper, the work that can't be done through automation, right? Those difficult conversations, that strategic thinking, all of those pieces can't be automated. That's what we need
Mm.
a human brain for. But what we
Yeah.
can do is create space and time by automating some of those other elements through chatbots, through AI, through ticketing systems, through whatever. I see Jaron Tate is on, and he is one of the principals over at Roots, right? They have a technology that helps integrate several different applications into a Slack channel for HR folks. Well, isn't that great? Where you can
Yeah.
have for your employees, they can go to one place and all of the people tools are integrated right there. So that, imagine going to orientation or orienting remotely. And instead of having someone receive 15 emails to say, fill this out, fill this out, fill this out, send it back, save it as a PDF, attach it here, it's all right there in an ecosystem. Just like it would be if you go to online stores or purchasing or an event that's online. Everything has its own ecosystem. So how can we create that for our employees? And there's no right or wrong way. I don't think there's no one singular way to do it. I think it's the framework and the mindset we apply to it to say, what can we automate? What can we offload? I built an entire HR ticketing system using Smartsheet, which was never built to be an HR tool. And I've used it for multiple tools within HR. I've used it to build a review process, an ATS, a ticketing system, a dashboard for an employee portal. I facilitated a reward and recognition program, all through a product that was made to be a project management tool. But by applying some creativity and agile thought, I looked at it and said, what else can we do with it? And my team built all these amazing tools. And I'm not a tech person. So if I can do it, anybody can do it. So I think it's reframing the way we think about it.
Right.
And to your point, letting go of the fear and embracing, and maybe it's starting small, embracing one thing and trying it, and then layering something else on top of it. You don't have to go and let go of everything all at once, because that might cause a little bit of chaos. So figuring out what you can kind of dip your toe into first and see the benefit there, I think is a good way for folks to start.
Oh, exactly. And if you look at it with where we're at today with things like some of our HR, IS and some of the systems there, Workday and all the others that are out there, they take a long time, right? At that level to get them built. And if you don't want to go vanilla, oof, that can be painful.
Right.
But if it's rolled out in the right way and the right time, the benefits that these things can have are incredible. Because, as you were talking, it was just like, I'd love you to talk about how that freed up your time by having all of this bespoke processes that you'd put in place and systems. What would happen if you didn't do that?
Yeah, I love that way of looking at it. What would happen if we do it, but what happens if we don't? And I
Right.
and I use this with the 5 imperatives and that framework that I use when I coach folks, is failure to adapt causes extinction. And it holds true in the HR space. So when I'll use the ticketing system as an example, when you don't have a system, and most IT departments use a ticketing system. So we took that concept and we're like, why can't we do that for HR? Because otherwise, everything is managed through email. So what happens when someone is on holiday? What happens when someone is out sick? What happens when someone's not sitting at their desk? And there's something that gets missed. And how do you search on email? And it causes so much wasted time. But a ticketing system timestamps it, and it allows you to then audit yourself and or your teams. Are they meeting their commitments from an SLA perspective? Are they responding in a timely manner? What are the trends that we're seeing in the questions and the intake? So we then start to create our own data set. And
Mm.
I'm a huge believer that the more information you have, as long as you use it in the right ways, can really help you to grow and evolve. So by creating this ticketing system, we could then see, wow, the majority of our questions are coming in about payroll concerns or about open enrollment or whatever the particular thing was that was popping up in the moment. So it allowed us to know how to craft our communications. It gave us insights into what was top of mind for our people. What gaps did we have on our team that we needed to fill? Because clearly our people had a lot of questions about these items. So that let me know that I needed to do better in communicating about those items because they didn't have the answers they needed. So looking at it like that it's not taking away anything. It's actually enhancing what you're doing, but it's making it a more agile and robust process. And again, it's a more consumer-like process. So instead of typing out a whole email, if I can click on a link and there's a drop down and it says, okay, my issue is this and I need this, and you hit submit and you get a confirmation that says, here's your ticket number, your question will be answered within 24 hours or 48 hours or what have you. I can then put that to rest in my head. I don't have to sit there and wonder, did they get my email? Are they going to respond? When are they going to respond? Because I've given them a framework to say it's been received. You'll hear a response within this time frame, blah, 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 blah. So it's a two-way street. It's helping me make sense of chaos. It's also helping my customer make sense of chaos so that they can move on to the next thing and not sit and wonder when and if they're going to hear back from us.
Right. And that whole thing there about, to your point earlier, it is a customer experience.
Mm-hmm.
And, I can't help but think actually, we talk about being worried. What does that look like? What does that look like for our jobs in our space? Well, none of us are going to be called HRs in even 2 to 3 years' time. Most of my clients, we're branding as something else now. You've
Mm-hmm.
got mental health champions. You've got head of diversity and inclusion champions. You've got all of these roles are coming in now, and they will be assisted by the systems that are coming in. So I guess my question to everyone is, what's your why? You know, where do you see yourself fit? We've never had a time like this ever, where there is no rule book. And I think, you know, where I get so frustrated with some business owners sometimes is, well, who's got the answers? No one's got the answers. That's the joy of this. You
Right.
know, we're in a period of future back thinking. Large organizations like Johnson and Johnson have used this for years, which is, okay, we will, you know, we're going to acquire our knowledge as we go. And by that, I mean, this is where we want our business to be. And hey, we can all do that, even if we're solopreneurs or we, you know, 4 or 5 in our business. We can do this now.
Mhm.
Yes, we're in a, you know, in an evolving and fast changing world, but we're used to that, right? VUCA's in our dictionaries. It's been in there for a while.
Right.
So yeah, all we're doing is saying, okay, this is where I want to be, and this is my purpose,
Mhm.
and rolling it back from there with all the technology that's coming out. And hey, that's going to be different in 2 years from now.
It is. And I think having that agile approach to understand if we roll the clock back 10, 15 years or longer, I can remember implementing HR technology, and it was an 8-month project. It was millions of dollars. And this was, you know, in the early 2000s. I remember by the time the system was actually implemented and up and running, it was already outdated
Yeah.
because of how quickly we are learning and we are changing. So I'm a huge advocate of smaller technology that moves faster and integrates better with what you already have versus these big, huge systems that take so much time, effort, and energy to implement. And then they're often obsolete, or you have to invest another several $1,000,000 to do the upgrades or updates, and to change it takes 6 months of programming. That's not where we're going in the future. We're going to smaller tech that serves a very specific purpose, but integrates and bolts together with other elements. I think we will see some of these big tools and systems start to diminish even more than they already are. And I'm not going to say the names of those technologies because I think they serve a purpose, but I really do think it's no longer going to be we can do everything under one umbrella of one
Right.
piece of technology, because it simply doesn't work as well as it could. So I've had a couple of people ask me, about the purpose statement, and what does that mean, and what does it mean to create your purpose? Well, I got into HR because I love people, or I want to work in people strategy, or I have a degree in OD, or what have you. So that's my purpose. And what I mean by creating a purpose statement, and I use this sample, I wrote this many years ago for an HR team I was leading, and I've saved it because as I'm coaching HR teams or HR practitioners and professionals, often I get this question, well, what do you mean by an HR purpose statement? Everybody knows why we do what we do. And I'm like, do they? They don't. And if you want to help your internal customers understand why you're there and what your purpose is, you have to tell them. So I'm going to read to you an example of a purpose statement, because I've gotten so many questions from people around what would this sound like? What does this mean? And how do I do this? And I'm happy to post this if anybody would like me to share it with you. As strategic partners, the people team supports and drives positive business outcomes, ensuring a people-first approach to all we do. We do this by fostering a people-first culture where our people feel a deep sense of connection to each other and the company, valued for their work, have a sense of fun and belonging. We strengthen our talent through improving our internal and external talent and selection processes. We create and execute ongoing people programs to support whole person growth and development. We drive and foster a diverse and inclusive workforce. We ensure comprehensive total rewards offerings remain market competitive, positively impacting our employment brand, delivering products, programs, and resources valued by our people. We seek and develop opportunities to bring forward creative and progressive solutions, creating a more agile and flexible workforce. So this is something I created years ago. It may or may not work for you. Parts of it may or may not work for you. But that's when I say define your purpose, that's what I'm talking about, is creating a statement. It's almost like your department's mission statement, your function's mission statement. And when you have something like this, it becomes the anchor, right? Everything you do then runs through this as a litmus test. So when you have leaders saying, hey, HR, can you go plan the birthday party event? Or can you go do this or pick this up or do that? You say, does this align with our stated purpose and what we're here to do? And if it doesn't, then it gives you that foundation to say, this really doesn't make sense for it to be housed within our function. Perhaps the safety team, I can give you an example. Years ago, I inherited an HR team, and they were ordering steel-toed safety boots for employees in the manufacturing facility. And they were ordering prescription eye protection. And I couldn't understand why they were doing that. And I've heard that this happens pretty frequently. There's an example that doesn't fit within our purpose. That's safety equipment. That belongs with the safety department or the operations department. That's not an HR function, but somehow it landed in HR because nobody else wanted to do it. So
Right.
if you have a defined purpose for your function in your organization, you can kind of use that as your litmus test for the work you're doing today and going forward. Does it align with that purpose, or is it outside of the scope of that purpose? And perhaps it really doesn't belong within HR, or maybe it doesn't belong at all within the organization because it's just the newest trend happening. But if it doesn't serve what we've defined as our purpose, then we don't necessarily want to look at it or bring it in.
And the reason why I love that is actually, everyone understood their purpose. Moreover, they understood the values of the business and how it fitted into their purpose. Only yesterday, I was talking to another HR consultancy founder who was mortified because they'd been in a meeting earlier in the week where a senior member of the team, when asked what the purpose mission statement of the business was, couldn't remember.
Oh, dear.
So, and actually, the irony of the whole thing is this is a great business, right? But they haven't invested that time to be able to align that purpose. And particularly with what's coming up over the next 12 to 24 months, over and above what we've been through. And I personally believe there's going to be even more change, not like what we've been through, but accelerated change because of what we've been through. We need to have taken the time to understand that purpose. And that purpose, yes, it starts at the top, but it's every single person in that organization has a purpose and meaning.
It's the entrepreneur, right? It's the
Right.
And to your point earlier, Steve Cadigan's book, who we're talking with Steve next week, so I'm very excited, with Workquake, he really focuses a lot of the book on everyone can have an entrepreneurial mindset, whether or not you own your own business. It's a mindset of taking ownership to drive an outcome and having that agile learning and thought process in all you do is critical to having that entrepreneur or intrapreneur mindset. And it makes me think about one of the best hires I have ever had within any of my teams. She was an entrepreneur for 15 years. had nothing to do with HR. As a matter of fact, we used to joke, we were friends, we used to joke about how she would be the last person I would ever hire into an HR role because she was always so inappropriate. She would blurt things out that would make you cringe, and I'd be like, nah, don't say that. No, don't say that. And yet I was faced with a situation where I needed someone to come in and build something and run with it and implement technology and all of there was so much I needed done. And I knew I needed somebody who could just pick it up and run with it and ask the right questions. And I called her and I was like, I have a role for you. And she came in, knocked it out of the park. And it was about a year or so later, we were laughing. And I'm like, I think we manifested this. Do you remember how many times we've talked about you working in HR and what a joke that would be and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, and here you are. And she's now a senior director working for another company. I have nothing to do with it because she took all of her previous entrepreneurial experience, say that fast, and applied it to work within the HR space and within the talent acquisition space. And she's a rock star. So I think if we have the right framework in how we approach it,
Right.
it doesn't necessarily matter if you're working in HR or marketing or finance or any part of the organization. It's the way in which you think about the work you do. And it just seems like other functions have moved faster and adopted technology. Why? I think it's because they've gotten better funding, better support at the executive level, because again, we go back to the old school mindset that executives see HR as a cost center. Well, we're not going to spend money to implement the right technology in HR because they just cost us money. So we're going to spend all of our budget on, Salesforce for our sales team, or all of our budget on these other areas because they are considered revenue generating. And I'm not saying they're not important. Clearly, every function within an organization is important, but we have to, as I say this all the time, claim our seat at the table and say,
Yeah.
we are equally as important, because what you're failing to see is that technology is going to be used by people. And the work we do helps to integrate all of these objectives and tools and systems with people and how they're going to use it. And to that one job title you said, like business behavior champion, I love that, because that's really so much of the work that we will be focusing on, if we're not already, is how do we change and enhance the behaviors to think the right way to drive and deliver the outcomes our businesses need. Excuse me, I've got hiccups now.
No problem. Yep. And I think that's the exciting bit about it. We're all reading now different books, and I look at my one here, and it's anything from The Slight Edge through to The Frontiers of Knowledge, through to some really heavy stuff like Radical Uncertainty, which has been written by John Kay and Mervyn King, the ex Bank of England governor. But they all have relevant and pertinent bits in it that we can sieve, if you like, and use in our world. And that's the beauty of what I like now. The frightening bit in some instances is what we've learned of old, and any formal education we had can be redundant within a decade. It can be redundant in 5 years, dependent on the reports you look at and you read. And I read a lot about the future of work, and some say 60%, some say 65% of the workforce, even in 5-10 years, will be completely different than the jobs that don't even exist now. That's a good thing for us, because it means how we operate and who we are different. Now, we can't plan for that, but we can come to terms with ourselves with so much change that there's probably 50% of the workforce that's coming that we don't know who they are or what they're going to do. But actually, at the end of the day, we are still, to your point earlier, dealing with people who will be in roles that they don't know either, who will be looking for, how do I communicate that? Because I'm not sure how to communicate that. I think it should be done this way, or I'm pretty sure this is the kind of behaviors that we should be encouraging. So our roles are more vital and pivotal, frankly, now to organizations. So that's why I'm a huge believer we can map it out as we want to. I mean, Barbie, your journey is going to be different, say, to mine. And, you know, Tracy, who sadly isn't with us today, but sent us a message earlier, none of them are wrong. But the beauty of it is we can now all really learn from each other. There is a level playing field. And I was ashamed a while back because, you know, my philosophy on recognizing and looking at your own unconscious bias and calling it, okay, right, my bad on that one. I'm going to do something about it.
Mm-hmm.
And some of our team are in Egypt. And she's a great friend of mine. And I really respect her as a female founder. And she said, Sam, you wouldn't be working with me right now if the world hadn't changed. And that was tough. You know, that was really hard for me to listen to and then think, yeah, I think you may have a point. But
Mm-hmm.
actually, I'm glad she called me on it, and we're at where we're at. Again, that's the good thing of change. Our talent's going to come from everywhere. Who we work with will come from everywhere. And actually, those of us who run smaller businesses have the opportunity now to work with larger organizations because we've got networks and alliances in place.
Agreed. And I think some of the larger organizations are also starting to adapt. Some of them have been doing it for a while, as you mentioned, but many of them, even some of my clients and their global billion-dollar organizations, they're bringing me in and people like me in
Mm,
to lead the charge in very specific ways, right? So I do a lot of work in talent acquisition transformation and helping folks understand that most organizations, when they think of TA, they start at selection, right? Oh, we have an opening, let's post it, see what comes in, and move them through the process. When in reality, we have to have a strategic framework around TA that is attraction, selection, onboarding,
right.
and there's lots of components within all of that. And they're bringing someone like me in instead of saying, okay, TA team, on top of the recruiting you're doing day to day, on top of managing your internal clients and just trying to keep your head above water, we
Mm,
also want you to transform everything you're doing. They're bringing in consultants and people like me to say, okay, we want you to help us see what we're doing differently, bring in innovation, bring in new ideas, and help coach our team so that they can understand a new way of doing things and allow them to focus on what they're doing day to day. But then I'm there as enhanced support to help them
mm,
really move the needle. And I'm seeing this happen more and more and more in the people space, where organizations that are becoming more progressive, they recognize that maybe they don't need an HR team of 50 people. Maybe they need 20 really great progressive thinkers, and then augment it with folks like me or contractors or what have you for those specific niche initiatives, and then they can move on to something else. So there's just so many different ways this can look. To your point, it's not a one size fits all, but it's, again, it goes back to why are we doing what we're doing, and
mm,
letting go of our fear. I think we've been so bound for
yeah.
so long with fear. And I would say my transition from being an employee to owning my own company has been phenomenal. I couldn't have asked for a better learning journey than I've had over the past 18 months, because I have to, just like you recognized when your friend said that to you about working with someone in Egypt, I've had to check myself on
Mm,
my perspectives and my bias and my prejudice and things that I used to do that felt really normal to me, that felt like this is the way I was supposed to do it. And now that the further away I am from that employee space, and I have a much broader purview because I'm working with so many people from multiple organizations, and having conversations like this on a daily basis, I'm seeing more and more of, wow, I contributed to that. Like this thing that I did before, that's not cool. Like I was part of the problem in many ways, and I've evolved, and the further away I am from that, the more and more I see how easy it is to get sucked into the habits you have and being skeptical and making assumptions. And when somebody comes into your office complaining, you immediately think you know the answer. Because I've done that. I was that person. And it's been a long time since I was that person, but I was that person. And I do think that we've got to really open up our minds, and it can be hard. It can be really, really hard. I think, as you mentioned, Tracy Sponenberg, she's one of my favorite people. And I love that she tells her story about how she was a transactional, paper pushing HR person.
I do.
Right. And that was her. And fortunately, that's never been me, but I definitely did some things I would do differently now. But I love her journey, and that she so freely talks about how hard it was for her to see it and to start making changes. And I think the good news about it is that it doesn't happen overnight, and it doesn't have to happen overnight. Your journey is uniquely yours. And so for me, man, there's so many things I would do differently if I could go back and do them differently. But the beauty is, when you know better, you do better. And so I love these conversations, because I think the more we can help people see that it can be different, you can let go of the fear and to pay attention to what people are saying. Read the comments on LinkedIn. When I post things out there about HR and this is what HR is about, and there's a ton of negative comments, that's coming from somewhere. People aren't just making it up. It's their lived experience. A lot of folks have really, really bad experiences with HR people. And so we have to own that. It doesn't mean it was you. You don't have to take it personally, right? I've had to go through this journey myself. I have had to step back and say, okay, I didn't do this to that person, but they had this experience, and I have to honor that that was their experience and find a way to make it better and help them see that it can be different. So I think we dig our heels in and we say, well, that wasn't me. And, not all HR people are like that. It's like when you see, we talk about white privilege, and I wasn't privileged, so that doesn't matter to me. Well, maybe you don't behave that way, but somebody does. So you have to pay attention to it because it exists. This feedback is there because people have had bad experiences. We have to take ownership of this in order to change it. And that's where I think these conversations can become so beneficial for folks.
Do you know, and I'm sitting here on the desk just holding on, because I've just, how I feel about this. And it's the whole thing around, listening. And, I bang on about this all the time, Barbie. It's listening without judgment. And very few people can do this. So classic. I had a bunch of HR consultancy founders about 6 months ago, and I took them all through an exercise, and I put them all into twos. And I said, I gave them all the same scenario. And basically the scenario was someone had made a complaint, and I wanted one of them to be the person giving the complaint. I wanted the other one to listen, not interrupt, didn't say a word. But I then wanted that person who was listening, to think about the perspective that other person was coming from. And what was really interesting at the time, it was, we were really in the thick of it in terms of COVID. People really stood back and thought, gosh, I hadn't thought about this, and I hadn't thought of, and that one term of I hadn't thought about was phenomenal, because not a word, they weren't allowed to say a word, and they had to listen and see it from the other perspective. I suspect we're going to see the need for more and more of that pure listening skill set. And hey, I thought I listened up until I went on a weekend course and I went through some of these models. Samantha, ironically, means listen. And, look at me, Miss Chatterbox. But that's what it means. And, I was quite smug and actually arrogant about it and realized I really didn't listen as well as I could without judgment.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's going to be
No.
a huge skill for us all to learn, truly learn moving forward whilst dealing with our own fears and biases as we go.
And it can be hard, right? I get it. I've been in the seat of the HR business partner, the HR, the head of TA, the head of HR. I've been in the seat where you listen to employees and it's always someone else's fault. And I think what happens, or at least when I look back at where I think my mindset and framework came from, is that we spend 90% of our time with 10% of the employees, right? We don't typically spend our time focusing on the employees who come to work, want to do a great job, have a great attitude, are committed and dedicated. We often are brought in to the problems. And so we then start to create a mentality for ourselves that every employees are problems instead
Yeah.
of employees are wonderful. And yes, they may have problems, but they're people just like me, just like you. And so what we end up doing, if we don't get out of that framework, is we assign the judgments from the last person to the one in front of us now. And anytime they come to complain or share an experience, we immediately assign a previous experience to that and a
Right.
previous judgment. And we have to stop doing that. We've got to listen to what they're saying based on what they're telling us and then move forward from there. That's not easy, especially, like I said, when 90% of our time is spent dealing with 10% of the population. So let's reframe that. Stop creating policy for the outliers. Stop creating process and infrastructure for the problem children. Create process, policy, and infrastructure for the majority of your people to support them to do the best job they can do, and then deal with the outliers as they happen, but allow them to see this is your behavior. This is what's working and what's not working. If you want to be a part of this organization, this is our expectation. You can meet it or not, but this is how we behave here. And I'm giving you the benefit of the doubt. I'm giving you this opportunity. Let's talk about your experience. What happened factually? What didn't happen? And what can we do to bring it together? And have that kind of open dialogue. Allow that person to be a part of the solution instead of simply listening, assigning a judgment, and then pushing them out the door. That's
Yeah.
never going to work.
Yeah. Because all round it creates a not bad feeling, right? At some point you're going to think about that and think, gosh, I could have done that differently. They're going to leave thinking either HR's have got a bad name or the organization's got a bad name. And it comes back to that listening without judgment. That's
Yeah.
going to be a really key and difficult skill for a lot of us. We all think, oh, we're enlightened individuals. I'm going to call it, we're all human. And therefore, we're all going to struggle with that over the next year or two.
We
But
are.
we need to call ourselves into account on that as we go through the change. And that's part of the how, Barbie, I think, those development of our own soft skills and
Right.
actually having that accountability partnership in other people who you'll take it from them because you've created that psychological safety where someone can say, hey, how else could you have done that? It's a very nice way of calling it, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there's ways to challenge without being accusatory. And
Agreed.
I've been guilty of this when someone brought me a product, whether it was a project plan or something, whatever their task that they were working on. And I could see that it wasn't on the mark. And I would say, well, why did you why isn't this what I asked for? Instead of saying, well, tell me what your thought process was, or what outcome were you expecting from this? Or tell me what got you to create this when we talked about this. So allowing them to share, because you know what, maybe they thought of something you didn't even think about. And so instead of being so boxed into your perception of what good looks like and what an outcome looks like, giving people some space to be creative and to bring their own ideas in can be transformational. Now, that doesn't mean they're not going to need coaching. That doesn't mean that they're always going to be right either. But the way in which you have those conversations can completely transform not only the outcome of the initiative, but your relationship. Because as I've said before, and Sam, you've heard me say this, people want to be seen, heard, valued, and understood. And every time we communicate with someone, every email, every conversation, every interaction is an opportunity for us to ensure the other person feels seen, valued, heard, and understood. Are we doing that, or are we simply assigning our own judgment from our past experience to this situation and pushing them out the door? And we've got to check ourselves on it. And it's not easy. It takes time. It takes time. It takes genuine concern and care for a better outcome. But I think it's possible. I think it's possible.
And curiosity. I think one of the things I get on a regular basis, sorry, Mad here. One of the things I get on a regular basis is, don't I ask some of the more uncomfortable, difficult questions? And Barbie, I'm sure you found it with sometimes some of the questions we ask, but actually by asking them in the right way, you are getting people, to your point, to think differently.
Mm-hmm.
And I am hoping we're going to move away from the era that we were in, which was, we want that diversity of thought. So we're going to recruit in a different way. We're going to recruit from a different source. We use that different source. We bring these people in, and then we say, actually, we don't like how you think. Well, why did you bring them in?
I have this analogy. I think that's the right word. I have this analogy I use around this. So when we think about recruiting folks from diverse backgrounds, whether it's, an HBCU or neurodiversity or whatever it is. So if you think about having a party at work, and your employees reached a goal, and you told the employees, when you reach this goal, we're going to have an ice cream party. So you spend weeks orchestrating this event, getting the very best vendor, getting 31 flavors of different ice cream so everybody can have whatever it is they want, all the toppings, everything. They've blocked off their time, and the party's at 2 p.m. in the afternoon. And everybody's excited. And you're planning really well. And so that you have everything in place by the time that party happens, you have the vendor bring the ice cream around 11 so that you can set it all up, and it's perfect for when the employees come in at 2 o'clock. The employees come in and all the ice cream is melted. Now, is that the fault of the ice cream? Or is it the fault of the person who failed to create a container to hold the ice cream so that it could be its very best by 2 o'clock? And this is what I think we do all the time. We hire these amazingly smart people from diverse backgrounds, and we tell them, we want your innovative thought. We want your experience. We want your ideas. And then we bring them in, and we don't have a container for them. And they melt away before they can ever be effective. That's our fault. That's not their fault. And we've got to change that. We've got to create organizations that support all the variable thoughts and ideas and challenges, and not take them all so personally. I am a firm believer that not all confrontation is negative. You can have some beautiful outcomes from positive confrontation and positive challenge, as long as both parties are going about it with an open mind and with the goal to create something better.
I absolutely agree. And I'm hoping that the era we are now in, we will listen more, because actually no one knows. And that's not a bad thing. I'm seeing more of that with some of my clients who obviously, like you do, work with larger organizations. And their feedback and what's coming back to me is that, oh, we are looking to recruit from somewhere else. The new recruits are coming in and they are being listened to. They are wanting X, Y, and Z. That trust is building. Trust is a huge thing, as we all know. Let's not even go there with some of the things that are happening right now around the world with lack of trust. We could be here all night, folks.
Yes.
But slowly, to your point earlier, seeing these things happen slowly, they are, and that's really exciting.
It is. I'm so hopeful that things will be different. And even for those folks who don't get on board, who choose to stay or remain stuck in the kind of old school mentality of HR, they will become obsolete. But the future is still going to be the future. It's going to evolve and it's going to change. And for those of us who are willing to support it and help create what it's going to look like, we're going to have great fun doing it. And the folks who don't get on board, they're the ones who are going to be left behind, because I just don't see a space in the future of people strategy. And as we architect what that looks like, there isn't going to be room for people who don't want this type of approach. And so it is really a personal choice. You can, a friend of mine used to say this: you can get on the bus because the bus is going in this direction. So get on the bus with us and go in this direction. Or you can get off the bus or not get on the bus at all. Your choice. But what you can't do is get on the bus and sit in the back looking out the back mirror or the back window and think that that's what's going to happen, because we're going in this direction. So if you get on this bus with us, you're going in this direction, whether you like it or not. And we hope you'll turn around and face forward and join us in the journey, instead of sitting there looking back, thinking that that's where we're going, because it's not.
I agree. And, we've talked about the book Bias by Jennifer Earhart, who's a fabulous author and just human being. But one thing's really struck me, because either way, whether you're talking about bias or where we need to be looking, and it's stayed with me ever since I read it. And at one point, her and her husband and the family were on a holiday, and they were driving on the wrong side of the road for them, right for me, of course. And as they were driving, the children in the back started screaming, and Jennifer had no idea. Well, they were merging onto a motorway the wrong way. They were looking the wrong way with a truck oncoming to them. And that for me was just so powerful. Just, if we're all looking in the right direction, we can create our own networks and spheres, which ultimately they all come together, don't they? They all come together for good. And we are going to see many of us called many different things, all good things, by the way, over the next few years. But it's up to us to create it. And that's exciting, as long as we all support each other.
I agree. And I think we have to own the negative things that have happened.
Right.
We can't continue to dismiss people and say, oh, that's just a disgruntled employee. Oh, that's just somebody who didn't get their way. Oh, that's just somebody who X, Y, and Z, right? You can assign any adjective you want to why that person's unhappy. But at the end of the day, that person is unhappy for a reason. And while we can't change everyone's mind, we can't change everyone's reality, we can do our very best to help them see things in a different way and to support them in ways that they might not, that they might need. And I think the challenge has been, because when we look at, TQM and all of the business methodologies of the 80s. I do this whole evolution of work as a keynote. And one of the things I look at is where we started, I think, really adopting this one size fits all, this mass approach to HR was in the late 80s, early 90s, where we said, okay, everything has to be equal. All policies, all systems have to be applied the same way to every person, because that's how we can defend what we're doing. And I challenge that there are some things that, yes, need to be that way for legal purposes, right? Compensation, all of those very black and white elements need to be looked at from a true, non-biased, holistic approach. But so much of the work we do doesn't have to be that way. And it's harder. It takes more time, but the outcomes are so significantly better when we treat people and interact with them like actual people and individuals, and we hear them out and we look at what can we do to make it better. What does flexibility mean to Sam versus what it means to Barbie? Because it may mean something totally different. And so we want to say we're an organization that offers a flexible, we have a flexible workforce. Well, that in and of itself means that it's different for different people, because we all define flexibility in different ways. Maybe flexibility for me means that I am able to leave work by 3:00 in the afternoon because my dogs are important to me and I need to get home to let them out. Someone else may have children and they might not be able to come into work until 9 a.m. because they have to drop children off at school. So flexibility to them means coming in later. It doesn't have to be a one size fits all in order to meet the needs of our employees in so many ways. So I think we've got to look at offering those options in every possible way we can, but there's no silver bullet for it. It's not black and white, and we've got to start thinking about it in a different way.
I agree.
We are over our time. I just want to call this out because I do try very hard to stay on time. And Sam, I have to thank you so much for joining me and sharing your insights. You just do such great work. And I love how you are bringing structure and a true business perspective into the world of HR consultancy, because in long past, it hasn't always existed. And, I love working with you. I'm sure all of your other clients love working with you. And we will definitely be seeing more of you here at the table for sure. But I heartfelt thanks for giving me and everyone watching this hour. And is there one thing you'd like to leave us with before we wrap up?
I think my one thing would be, don't be afraid of the next few years. Find yourself your own team, not a tribe, because a tribe indicates that others are excluded. Find your team and work through it. That's the best piece of advice I can give anyone right now. And hopefully you'll realize the power of that as we get into 2022 and 2023 and beyond.
Yeah, I agree. It's find folks who will challenge you, find folks who will support you, and challenge yourself. Find folks who will be honest with you and transparent with you and say, I'm not sure you're living within your integrity right now. How about we look at it this way? Or perhaps you might need to take a step back. Maybe you need to apologize. Maybe you need to rethink that. But those are the people we really need. Those are the people who truly care about you. Are the people who are willing to give you that feedback and willing to bring things forward and almost force you to look at it and say, this exists for a reason. Maybe you didn't cause it, but you're now responsible for fixing it. And what can we do together to do that?
I love it. Yep.
Thank you again. Thank you everyone for being here. Wonderful session today. As always, I will download this and upload it to my YouTube channel. If you haven't subscribed, I would love it if you did. It is The Business of HR on YouTube. I upload all of the sessions from the table. Every episode is already uploaded. This one will be uploaded as soon as I possibly can, usually by the end of today, if not tomorrow morning. And next week, we have Steve Cadigan, author of Workquake. Very excited to have him on. His book is phenomenal, touches on a lot of what we talked about today. He goes much deeper into certain areas and aspects, and I absolutely love his idea that, all of us can be entrepreneurs within the roles we have and really make an impact and a difference and stay relevant by just changing the way we think about the work we do. So stay tuned for that next week. Would love your comments if you want to comment down below. And thank you, everyone. Have a wonderful rest of your Tuesday.